What did you hear with respect to trade, Tori, between the United States and the EU and the United States and Italy? The president pointing out that Italy makes great products. I have some of them. I'm not sure what he was talking about there, but I guess he does.
Well, for me, I think the most important thing coming out of the last week or two in our relations with Europe and Italy today is that the president has admitted that trade can be a win-win. And that is a huge change in rhetoric from this White House. Previously, it has seemed like the president thinks that if another country is winning on trade, it means America is losing. And that has been a complete flip. And now we realize that when we work with our partners in the EU, like Italy, that we can all be better off.
But Tony, don't you believe that President Trump and Prime Minister Conte don't actually see eye to eye when it comes to trade?
Not on trade. They certainly do, as we saw on immigration and maybe a couple other issues, but definitely not on trade. I mean, Italy's economy is very weak right now. The government is a relatively weak government. You know, Conte is an obscure law professor before he became prime minister. They depend on auto exports. They depend on apparel exports. They also depend on steel exports. So they're subject to the current tariffs on steel. So they're already suffering. Hey, one thing on Iran. We just note that the Iranians about a week ago said that they had turned down offers from the U.S. administration to meet. So it'll be interesting to follow up on that in that context, if that's still the case. So
go ahead, Bill.
Well, Michelle, we were scrambling here when they were talking about the transatlantic pipeline and the possibility thereof. You know, there's a difference between building ports and shipping or laying a pipe and trying to get the LNG over there. I mean, that's going to take forever. It's a bit of a, I'll take a page out of Matheson's book here. That's a bit of a pipe dream, don't you think?
I think so. I actually got confused at that part.
Right,
They're talking about a second pipeline besides the controversial one that that the Germans are building with the Russians to get their gas. Clearly, that would be beyond the ports that Kayla highlighted earlier. Would be another big, dramatic. A competing pipeline would be an enormous thing.
I mean, that was discussed during the Obama administration when Russia was threatening to cut off the natural gas supplies.
We can't get a tunnel between Jersey and Manhattan.
Right. I mean, how are we going to get a pipeline to Europe? Tony?
They are talking about a pipeline from Azerbaijan to Italy. It's a big issue for the Italian political parties, and there's a dispute actually in this government, which is a coalition government, between the two coalition majority members as to whether that should get built, and also the talking about building tunnels, a tunnel to France, that there's a dispute there as well.
So, Michelle, I thought it was interesting that the Italian prime minister really sort of fell in with the president on his message of trade. The word China never came up, but it was unmistakable that that's who the president was talking about when he talked about you know, intellectual property, non-tariff trade barriers, and so forth. And the Italian prime minister said the WTO effectively is broken. It calls China an emerging country, and China is and therefore gets certain dispositions favorable. China is no longer an emerging country. I thought there was really a confluence there.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. The one thing I would say is that because of the trade disputes that the president is having with the EU, it obscures what would normally be common cause with the Europeans. They've long had complaints about China as well. They've done steel tariffs. The EU has done steel tariffs on China long before the U.S. ever did, and they've had lots of concerns. They've also stopped lots of deals that they didn't want to see happen, things that at other times we would have called protectionist, except now we have a president who agrees with a lot of those positions. But again, we don't hear about a lot of that because we get so focused on what has been the U.S.'s and the president's very strong stance against the EU itself when it comes to trade.